Hello and welcome everyone back to another episode of Understable Discourse, your go-to place for all the best disc golf content, knowledge, whatever's going on the Pro Tour. We got you covered. A bit of a new setup. You can see there's a whole bunch of stuff behind me that there's normally not behind me. I've got some new lighting going on, so hopefully that's looking all fresh and hopefully the audio sounds good. We're testing some new stuff. We're setting up some new things, and it's a fun time around here, learning and dabbling into some new stuff. I got my very first ever Whatnot stream coming up tomorrow, which is going to be a blast. That's at 8:30 over on Whatnot. The account is GaryDad4421. You can find the link to that stream in the description down below if you want to join. And if you're a first-time Whatnot user, you get $15 of free credit to use on the stream. So make sure to use that if you're hopping on over. But we got a decent bit to talk about today. We're looking at D-Glow this upcoming weekend. Starting tomorrow, we have the last Disc Golf Pro Tour Plus event of the year and the last regular season event of the year. It's a big one. It's a chance for players to have their last chance at moving up and down that Pro Tour leaderboard before we go into playoffs, where the points get, bigger and more important. But let's get into it. D-Glow is, I would say, an event. It's the Discraft Great Lakes Open, and it's an event that's been on the tour for a long time. I would say it's one of the old standard events. It's, held at Toboggan, which is a course that requires a combination of distance control, and I would argue a lot of, nose angle is a big thing because you throw off of these massive hills and you throw up hills, and it's a lot of, I would say, things that we get to see glimpses of at different courses throughout the year, but D-Glow is kind of, I would say, probably most well known for this type of disc golf play. And it sounds like the weather's going to be kind of rough this upcoming weekend, so they're going to have some wind to contend with, which makes it even more difficult because when you're throwing down a massive hill or up a major hill, the wind can really wreak havoc on your ability to kind of control the shot, the angle, where it goes, and it's very easy for things to get away from you. So D-Glow is already a tough event and also very tough physically because of the length of the course being well over 11,000 feet. Plus, like I said, up and down hills. It is a physically demanding week with 4 rounds, and all these guys and gals are out there practicing rounds. It's a lot on the body, and it's just a different kind of disc golf than we get to see. And there's a lot of differing opinions on this course and whether it is a great course, belongs on the tour, or whatever it may be. It is the world championship course for next year, and there's been a lot of promises of big things they're going to do in terms of infrastructure, course cleanup, and all of that. However, there are some arguments to be made about what this course is like and how it plays, and when the best player in the world lists this as his least favorite course on tour, you have to think about it. Whether or not it's something that's, it's just a meme or whatever, you have to consider if some of the top players aren't humongous fans of the course, maybe there's something to be said there. And I don't know if it's in reaction to, they probably had this planned long before any of that information came out, but there are some interesting changes to the course that we see this year for both the MPO and the FPO, and let's talk about that a little bit. So, like I said, the MPO course length is over 11,000 feet now for both the A and the B pins. In the past, one of them was just short of 11,000 feet. So the course was made slightly longer for the MPO field and actually adjusted to be a little bit shorter for the FPO field, but still a lengthy course, by all means, in terms of the elevation changes and everything that we see typically. And the par was adjusted from 65 to 66 for the B pins for the MPO and 68 to 69 for both layouts for the FPO. One of the first changes that we see can be found on hole 2, where it's going to be played the same for both rounds for the FPO, so no split in pin positions like we saw before. And there's a new A pin position for the MPO, which is going to have the hole ending off to the right. Now, if you remember, this is the hole that is basically just power shot up the hill. Basket sits across the crest of the hill at the top and up a little ways. So it's all about a nice power shot off the tee and then having to deal with a awkward uphill kind of run up leading into the green. And so with a pin now off to the right, it's not so severely off to the right that I think it's going to make that big of a difference, because you're still going to have to get your tee shot up the hill. There may be a little bit of benefit to ending slightly left off that tee shot to open up your angle for that that new pin position off to the right, but ultimately this hole is going to come down to what it's always come down to, which is a power tee shot and then a controlled second shot dealing with a bit of a difficult foot position as you're trying to play uphill. One of the next changes that we see, although it's a bit of a tiny change, comes to hole 5, which is, I think one of my favorite holes on this course. It's that picturesque downhill tunnel shot to the green. What I like about this hole is that there is a bit of a tunnel. It's not crazy tight, but it is tight enough that an errant shot should get you in trouble. And it requires, the pros to really think about their nose angle, to think about their disc speed as it comes into the ground, because if you throw something too fast and it hits too close to the basket, you do run the risk of skipping OB long. There's a lot of things to consider, and it's a shot that I would argue that a lot of the pros on tour really love when they get it right. I would imagine that, obviously, for me, anytime I hit my line, I'm ecstatic about it. But when you get to the pro level, it becomes such a norm, I think, to hit lines that, yes, it is. They're happy to hit their lines, but there are not many times when it's exciting for a top level pro to hit a line. And this is one of those holes where I think, and we've seen people talk about it. Ezra and Goose talked about it when they were reviewing the course. It is exciting to hit this line and to get close to the basket. And I would say some of the best shots of the weekend will be shots that we see on this hole making it into C1. But the slight adjustment they made is they took the OB that's behind the basket and they pushed it back ever so slightly. So now the new OB, even though it's not an incredible difference, has been pushed back to just about circle's edge, which means if you skip long, you may not have that close of a putt coming back to the basket, but that's the change they made on hole 5. Holes 7 and 8 kind of see a similar change. Hole 7, typically the OB kind of fades off into, eternity off the left and the right and goes back to nowhere. And so there's kind of an open space behind the basket where you can kind of go back as far as you want. This year they capped that off with OB right behind the basket, not right behind the basket like in circle, in like the bullseye or circle 1 or anything, but they put OB back there, I think mostly to protect the tee area for the next hole, because it is relatively close for a very errant shot if it goes long. So they put that there. And then on hole 8, they brought the OB line in from the road a bit to maybe allow room for some more spectators or just have it be off the road. And so they tightened up the OB lines on hole 7 and 8. Our next, I would say, big change comes on hole 10. Hole 10 is, it's a very uphill shot. Typically, it's a big par 4 uphill, kind of slightly left to right moving off the tee into a position shot, and then a power shot up the hill again. A very common thing we see here at Toboggan. But in the past, there's been no OB on the hole to kind of speak of, and that can be problematic because the rough on the left and the right is really, really terrible, to the point where you see it's not uncommon for pros to lose their discs in there, or they come out of the rough all cut up from having to find a position to play in. It's not a very good time for anybody, and unfortunately a lot of the stuff is left to grow out there and gets pretty significantly terrible to deal with. And I can't imagine anyone wants to go in there. So this year, what they did was they moved and they put OB surrounding the fairways and the basket for the entire length of the hole, forcing you to keep it in the fairway, which I think is going to make the hole demonstrably harder for people, because there's just the pressure of having to keep it safe. And who knows, it actually might, I'll be curious to see what happens with the score separation, because you could argue that it's going to make the hole a lot harder, or you could argue that it's going to compress the scores because it's going to force people to have to play safer off the tee and go for par a lot more than try to go for the birdie. Because when you round that corner and you go up to that basket, it is a very difficult shot. Even though they brought the basket in about 40 feet from where it used to be, it's still a very, very difficult shot to get to the basket. And one of the things that, a real telltale sign of that difficulty is that when Goose and Ezra were playing this in their practice round video, they had mentioned that if this would be an A tier, the hole would probably be listed as a par 5. It is that difficult. So I'll be very curious to see if we get good score separation with the addition of the OB. It's probably going to help with pace of play a decent bit. But will we see people just laying up and playing for par more? That's something we'll be tracking after the event to see what happens. Holes 11 and 12 see very similar changes where there's a new pin position for both the MPO, only one pin position for the MPO and the FPO this year, and a new pin position for the MPO has been placed slightly to the left of where it was last year. Not a massively big change. It'll just be a slight difference to what we've seen in previous years. And then on hole 12, the MPO and the FPO are getting a new A position, which is going to be off to the right, tucked into the woods a bit more. Not a humongous change, just a bit of a difference from last year to this year. Hole 14 sees a bit of a significant change, not for the MPO, but strictly for the FPO. Hole 14 is the kind of let it loose hole, as most people can refer to it as. It's the hole where it's just a big open field leading to the massive upwards hill to the basket, tucked in at the top of the hill. And we see the MPO players get to really unleash the cannons on this one. And the way the FPO is always played, this was from the same tee pad as the MPO, playing to a pin located at the bottom of that hill. So still kind of a release all your power type of shot, but not having to climb the hill at all. This year, the FPO is playing to the same pin position at the top of the hill, but they've moved the tee pad all the way up to just off the bottom of the hill. So now they have to play same par 4 and everything, but they have to actually play to the top of the hill. I think this is a great change. It adds a bit more difficulty. It's not just two open field shots. Now it's a power shot up a hill and then a controlled shot continuing up that hill from probably a difficult, position in terms of uphill run up. It adds, I think, an extra degree of difficulty that'll be good to see the FPO have to deal with. Hole 15 is our last change on the course in terms of what they've done to the actual holes themselves, and it's a pretty significant change. In the past, the FPO have played a 567-foot par 4, kind of tricky how it's all set up, but this year they have moved them back and they're allowing them to play the 960-foot par 4 that the MPO have played in the past, and they've just adjusted the par to a par 5, which, once again, I like the difficulty change for the FPO. I'm really excited to see them having to deal with a longer hole, and putting a par 5 down the stretch is a really good thing for their division. And what they've done to change the difficulty for the men is they've moved them back further up a hill, so now they're teeing off from an elevated position, which is typical for what we see at Toboggan, and the hole's been extended to be 1,130 feet long. And you'd think that, and it's been adjusted to a par 5, and you may think that makes the hole more difficult. Actually, on the contrary, they take one of the more difficult holes on the track, a very difficult par 4, and they've turned it into a gettable par 5 where, 3 really solid shots, a nice big tee shot, and then probably a controlled shot with maybe a mid or even something as low as like a putter that gets you around the bend to the ideal landing zone from where it would have been in previous years, and then the last shot up to the basket. I think it's going to prove to be a really interesting change. It adds a picturesque shot off the tee and takes the hole from being, a difficult par 4 down the stretch to being a more gettable par 5, which you could argue is a good thing, is a bad thing, whether or not the course should be made easier, harder, whatever it may be. It is a fun change getting to see another shot from an elevated position as players, have the ability to open up, which also brings into play, the wind and keeping your shots under control. So in that sense, this could be a difficult change for certain members of the FPO or the MPO field who maybe aren't able to keep their disc in control in rough winds. But that does it for the changes to the course. Let's actually talk about the players themselves, because like I said, this is a type of course where you need a combination of power and good nose control, and I think nose angle control, and being the last regular season event of the year, this is the last chance you have to bank this event in your list of allowable rounds to be counted towards your Pro Tour standings, as the playoff rounds are their own separate bank of points that don't get affected by the rest of your season. So, the way it works, like we talked about in the episode of Chain Reaction this week, is that you get only so many events that count towards your Pro Tour standings, and if you have more than that, your worst ones are eliminated. So this is a chance for you to, if you've played the max amount, this is a chance for you to erase one of your bad scores, or if you haven't played the max amount, to add more points that you need. So it's a big it's a big event for those trying to make some movement on the leaderboard and get themselves in a better position to go into the playoff stretch and attack and hopefully make it into the Tour Championship or retain their spot that they've already are holding to make it into the Tour Championship. Looking at the FPO field, I think there's some obvious things we have to talk about, and one is Holland Handley. What's going on with Holland right now? Is she going to be able to come out and perform well? Has it been a little fluky recently? We've got no indication from her that it's injury related or anything going on. Maybe just a stretch of not so great play. And Holland is the kind of player who would be, I think, ideal to perform out at this event. Looking at her scores in the past, last year in 2023, she won this event by 3 strokes over Haley King and 6 strokes over Kristen. Holland really is, in my mind, to be the favorite to win this event. I would love to see her shake off the last 3 events, come out and really showcase her power, her control, and she's definitely, I think, a major contender here. Another contender is going to be Silva Saarinen, who has been a dominant force this season, winning some huge events, taking down some significant competitors. And this is, I believe, her first time playing D-Glow, so she's technically playing this, a little bit more blind than everybody else. Obviously, she's getting practice rounds in. So we're going to see, is her incredible play going to translate over to this course? Remains to be seen. Is this event just going to be a warm-up for her to go into the playoff stretch? A few other people to keep in mind. We've got Owen Scoggins, obviously, who has won this event before in 2023. It's a big course for Owen's power level. I don't know. She doesn't really hold up well. There are certain holes that she's definitely not going to be able to play for birdie. But we know with Owen's putting and consistency, that doesn't typically tend to matter for her down the stretch a lot of times. So I think she's going to be competitive. You've also got Missy Gannon looking to, keep moving in a positive direction as she finishes her season out. She's had some good recent events, and we'll see what she can do there. And then you've got some other players, like Ella Hansen is a big power thrower. I think she could play really well out here. You've got, Kat Murch, Valerie Mandujano, and Cadence Burge. So I think there's a lot of people in contention at the FPO side for this. And when I think about it, really, I think what I'm going to see this weekend is I'm going to put Holland Handley coming in as my winner. I think she's going to shake it off and get done what she needs to get done and go into the playoff strong, which is going to make the Player of the Year conversation very interesting. I'm gonna put Ella Hansen coming in second place, giving her power and her consistency, and I'm gonna have Kat Murch, I think, coming in third for this event. She just got a nice win at the CCR Open, and this hopefully is the momentum she needs to keep playing well. She has played very well all season. She just hasn't found herself, in that podium spot enough that we would have expected to see her at. So that's my 3. Got Holland Handley, Ella Hansen, and Kat Murch in my top 3. Moving over to the MPO side of things, I'll rip the Band-Aid off. I don't think we have to discuss this. I have Gannon coming in first. He has won 6 out of the last 7 Elite Plus events that he has played. He is a killer over 4-round events, and honestly, he's had a significant amount of success at this course before. He took down the event last year by 2 strokes over Isaac Robinson and Ricky Wysocki. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Gannon come out and win this event again. I don't think anyone would be surprised to see it happen. So I'm not even going to discuss who else I think could, is going to win. I think Gannon's going to win. There are some players I think that can be very competitive here. You got Paul McBeth coming off a big win at Idlewild. He's had a lot of success at D-Glow before. Everyone, harkens back to the day of Paul's 18 under here. The course is definitely different than when he shot that 18 down, but, he's had a lot of success at D-Glow before. And you have to look at guys like Anthony Barella with his power, playing out here. He hasn't had the world's greatest success at the D-Glow course before at Toboggan, but, anyone with that kind of power, you have to look at their game. And then we have Simon Lizotte, who, has been a bit up and down this year, kind of hit or miss. But, the guy plays really well out here. He's won this event before, and I wouldn't be surprised. And he's also finished really highly in previous years. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him play incredibly well here and put down a good solid score. So I've got Gannon coming in first, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say coming in second for this event, I feel really good about Calvin Heimberg. I think Calvin Heimberg is going to put down a solid tournament here, really showcase, why he's great over 4-round events. He's probably going to have one round that's not so great. Another round is going to be an absolute heater. I've got Calvin coming in second. And you know what? I'm going to take the flyer on Simon Lizotte coming in third, giving us the entertaining event that we know we have. It's been up and down. This could be a real miss for me, but I'm going to put Simon coming in third for this event. And so I've got Gannon, I've got Calvin, and I've got Simon. But what do you think? Who do you think is going to finish in first place for both the MPO and the FPO? Do you like these picks? Is there someone that I absolutely forgot about? Am I sleeping on somebody? I've got a few people that it'd be fun to watch play this event and see how they do. But let me know in the comment section down below who you think is going to win both divisions, what you think of the course. Is this the most boring and worst course on tour? Do you love this course? Defend it down in the comments or support the claims that it's a terrible course. Let me know what you think. Personally, for me, I don't think it's the worst course on tour. It's definitely probably not in my top half of courses on tour. And this offseason, I'll give you my ranking for courses on tour as a viewer and a statistician, not as a player, of course. But let me know what you think down in the comments. If you could, leave the video a like, hit that subscribe button. It's a great way to support the growth of our channel. I really appreciate everyone here spending the time watching us grow and develop and change as we get more things, fancy lights, and all kinds of fun stuff. And so if you haven't already, make sure you go out this week, play some disc golf, watch some disc golf, and until next time, this has been Understable Discourse.